We're here to talk about the geothermal tax credit, this 30% federal tax credit that you might have heard of. First of all, this is not professional accounting advice. This is a simple example for understanding. You should talk to a certified accountant before doing any of this. However, I'm going to give you a brief idea of the ins and outs of this. So the 30% tax credit, as explained everywhere, draws a lot of questions from people. So for an example, here's an example someone wrote about their story. They paid $14,000 for the heat pump installation, another $12,000 for the loop field portion of it, totaling $26,000. Then they subtract here 30% of the 26,000, which is $7,800. So they're saying that the final cost of their system was $18,200, which is a great deal. That 30% made a huge difference in the total price of this geothermal system. Well, one thing to remember that this is a federal tax credit. So this family paid $26,000 out of pocket and didn't realize that benefit until they filed their taxes. So let's get into the details of that, because your ability to take advantage of this tax credit depends on a couple of things. The publication you file when you do your taxes, or your accountant does your taxes, is Form 5695. And you can take the time, Google it, and read through the whole thing. But the main issue here in this video is, am I actually going to get a tax refund for the 30% of the system? And the answer to that depends on your income. You have to pay federal income tax the year you install a geothermal system to be able to take advantage of this tax credit. So I'll give you a simple example here. Here's the form filled out. Let's say the system was $35,000 in this case. And there's some other incentives on this form which don't apply to our conversation. But the total is 30%, so that's $10,500. Right? That's what we're trying to get back here. So it's $10,500. So the problem with this is in the fine print, which is right here on line 14. The limitation based on tax liability. Let me show you what that's actually referring to. In the instruction sheet, the URL is right here. You have to do a calculation that basically caps your ability to take advantage of this federal tax credit. And what it's looking at is, the first thing is most important. Enter the amount from Form 1040, line 47. Well, what is that? Here's an example. I just threw in some bogus numbers here that sort of made sense. But what line 47 is actually your total taxable, your total tax liability. So if your taxable income, meaning that your family made just under $160,000, your total tax is $31,000. That's what it's asking, right? To add those up. So it's asking, what is how much do you owe, or did you already pay to the federal government this year? Well, you don't need to go through your taxes to really figure this out right away. What you can do is Google tax brackets, and you'll see what federal tax bracket you'll fall into. So in this past example, let's say it's a married couple, and they're making somewhere in this range I have highlighted here. They're going to be paying 25%. So what this means is, let's say they make $100,000 before taxes. They're going to be paying 25% of that to the federal government. So $25,000 is their, for this argument, it is their line 47 in this case. So right here, if this were $100,000 roughly, now there's other deductions and stuff that come into play, but they're minimal. They're minimal for the sake of this conversation, that is. Their line 47 would be close to this. So this one's 31,000. That one example will be 25,000. But the important part about that is there is a number here, because the gotcha phase here, right, is you take that number. So in our example, well, let's say it's $25,000, and you add up any other credits you're taking. Now, I don't even know what most of these are. They probably don't apply to you. But what you do then is in line 11, you subtract line 10, right? Let's say 10 is 0. You don't know what these other credits are. You're not taking them. From line 1. So I have $25,000 in line 1. I'm subtracting 0. I still have $25,000 in line 11. So when we go back to the sheet, this is still, right, the limitation based on tax liability. This is still $25,000. And then the last step, line 15, says enter the smaller of 13 or 14. Well, it looks like I can take that whole chunk. I can take that $10,500 on the $35,000 geothermal system I'm going to install, which is great. So now you're taking all of that. And as you continue on through your 1040, you can say here, in this example, it wasn't a $35,000 system, it was a little less, but they're taking a $9,400 credit here. So where they owed $31,000, you subtract 9 and change, now they're only paying $22,000, which is huge, right? And that number then, as you go down further, it might result in a tax refund, right? Unless you're self-employed and you pay a lot of money at the end of the year, you're just reducing your total liability. But either way, a lot of money is being saved here with this 30% federal tax credit. Now the problem is, and it becomes for people who don't pay a lot of federal income tax. I'm talking about people who are maybe retired, or who simply don't work. And here's an example of that problem. Let's say that the person is retired and they make $10,000 just doing a hobby. So they would fall into this 10% tax bracket, meaning that they owe $1,000 to the federal government. So their little line 47 right here would only be $1,000. Get rid of this right now. Okay, so they owe $1,000 to the federal government. They install a $35,000 geothermal system. They start to fill out this form. They say $10,500. Looks good. Looks like I'm going to get a lot of money back. Then they're going to get to line 14, and it's going to say you have to do this little calculation. And here's the calculation again. Enter line 47. Well, their line 47 is $1,000. $1,000 minus 0, because they're not taking any other of these credits that we don't know about, is 1,000 minus 0 is 1,000. So when it says subtract and then enter this on line 14 of this form, you have to enter $1,000. So you think, okay, what does that mean? Well, line 15 says enter the smaller of line 13 or 14, which means $1,000 is all that you can take. You thought you were getting $10,000 or $10,500, and you're actually only able to take $1,000. Now, you can carry a credit forward, so you can subtract line 15, right, 1,000 from 13, and that difference is going to be 500. Hope it won't type in here, 9,500. And you could do the same thing next year and the year after that and the year after that. I don't know the exact number of years you can continue to roll this over. I researched it, I looked everywhere. Even Energy Star and the federal government is confused about how many years you can roll that forward. It says it's clear you can carry it through 2016, and you may be able to carry it beyond 2016. But again, there's no clear answer to that question at this time from the federal government. But this is the example, and this is what you need to do if you're considering installing a geothermal system, and you really want to know if that 30% tax credit is going to apply to you. Simply, you probably know what your family's household income is, right? Do a quick calculation, right? Let's say it's $100,000. You know you're in the 25% federal tax bracket. You're roughly paying $25,000 to the federal government. That's great, because now you know that you can subtract 30% of whatever your geothermal system is going to cost, and there's still going to be more money that you owe to the government. My advice here to people who do not have and who do not need to pay federal income taxes because they're retired or they're on some sort of disability or whatever the case may be, you need to understand that you're not going to get a refund here, right? If you only owe $1,000 to the federal government and you think you're getting a $10,000 tax credit for this geothermal system, you're not going to get a check. The amount might roll forward, but you're not going to get that. Benefit. A couple of other points. There's not a lot of restrictions on these. The only one that there was a specific note about is that the distribution system, right? So the ductwork, if you're going to put all new ductwork in your house, that wouldn't count even if it was part of a geothermal system. And the emergency heat. The emergency heat is called auxiliary heat. It's not that expensive. Most geothermal units will come with an auxiliary heat pack. There might only be a couple $100 to $1,000. They're not supposed to be included in the total cost when you're calculating your total cost and then taking the 30% from it. Other than that, it has to be Energy Star. It has to meet Energy Star, which most geothermal units do. You can look at the manufacturer's site. Most of those units are going to apply. Everything else about the installation is included. So, the cleanup, the piping, the electric, all of that is included in the geothermal installation. So that's the 30% federal tax credit. It's due to expire at the end of 2016, although there is a lot of hope that that is extended. There's nothing yet out there as of today, and it's just roughly October of 2015. So that's the 30% geothermal tax credit. I highly encourage anyone who is thinking about doing geo to do it before the end of 2016, to do it especially if you're in a heating dominated climate, right? So anywhere in the northeast, northwest, if you're burning propane or heating oil, it's a no-brainer, especially with this 30% federal tax credit. There's a good story and good numbers on Geothermal Genius. It's called By the Numbers. I think you just go to here and Family Example, and you can read through all of these numbers and kind of see how it all shakes out. That's our spiel, unprofessional, non-legally binding, what have you. This is not accounting advice. This is not legal advice. So please seek out a professional when you are claiming this federal tax credit by Form 5695.